We're now moving on to talk by Drs. Ken Irving and Andrew Gemmell, representing the United Nations World Water Quality Alliance. And let me just give a brief introduction of both. Andrew Gemmell currently serves as a technical discipline manager for land quality and remediation at SLR Consulting in Cape Town, South Africa. He's also a collaborator with the World Water Quality Alliance and a member of the Lake Victoria Working Group. Andrew has been an environmental consultant since 2009 with professional experience in contamination, surface water, groundwater, soil, and related projects, with a holistic understanding of the soil, surface water, and groundwater environments and the interaction between these. From 2019 to 2021, he worked as an affiliate consultant for the United Nations Environmental Program when we first interacted with Andrew, coordinating activities related to the World Water Quality Assessment Pilot Use Cases approach in Africa. And Dr. Ken Irving is a board member of ACARE. He obtained his PhD in 1987 from the University of East Anglia, working on shallow lake ecology, which he shifted scales to study ecosystem structure and secondary production in Lake Malawi, Nyasa, and Nyasa. He moved to Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland, to spend a decade and a half grappling with the intricacies of policy and ecology to support the implementation of European water policy, while still running and being involved in projects on the African Great Lakes. He moved to IHE Delft in 2011, the Institute of Water Education in the Netherlands, to head up the aquatic ecosystem group and engage more fully in research and teaching to support capacity development. Recent projects on the Great Lakes include work on Lake Victoria and local fisheries management. So with that, I would like to welcome Ken and Andrew to give their presentation. Thank you.
So I'm going to give a brief overview connecting ACARE with the World Water Quality Alliance, but also reaching out to a more general principle of partnerships. And I've titled the short presentation as "No Group is an Island." And I think the advisory groups for ACARE, which we heard from yesterday, I think they will also perhaps resonate with this expression that no group is an island, and linking with each other and linking with external partnerships, as indeed we heard earlier with the Great Lakes research, is essential. So I'm going to present this jointly with Andrew, who's going to chip in later on. So we can have the next slide. So the African Great Lakes, obviously this audience needs no introduction, but the point I want to raise here is that not only are they, amazing systems and support the livelihoods, which I'll come to in a minute, but they are an extraordinarily unique and rich system. Sometimes up to Tanganyika is estimated to be 15 million years old. Malawi 7 or 8 million years old, and to a rich and deep history, which is also manifested by the very rich the number of endemic species. So they really are truly World Heritage Sites that, apart from anything else, for future generations, need to be looked after and protected for the delicate grandparents that they are. And they have a whole range of different types of species, not just fish. There's a whole range of other organisms for which there are many endemics within the Great Lakes. So next slide. And of course, we know much more immediately that, or for immediate acknowledgement, I suppose, of importance, is that they are critical for livelihoods, biodiversity, and also knowledge. And their livelihood function is increasing because of population increases and more, I suppose, uncertainty with many of the success of crops to do with shifting climates, and indeed in a region which already has variable climate. Then fish become a very, very important mainstay of livelihoods and economics, including export markets. Next slide. But we also know that the fish themselves are under extreme pressure from overfishing, but also from a range of other pressures. So nutrient enrichment was mentioned earlier. You know, it's a particular problem in Lake Victoria, but it's also detectable in all the lakes, even some of the lakes we think are more pristine, such as Malawi. There are already hints and certainly local examples of nutrient enrichment. Invasive species is a large problem in Lake Victoria, but it is a huge risk in some of the other lakes. So aquaculture, for example, brings with it the need to consider how to actually protect endemic species from, for example, any introductions that may inadvertently get into the lake system. There are water uses, abstractions, local abstractions, but also larger scale issues with some of the lakes to do with water diversions. Mineral exploration and extraction and economic discussions about oil exploration in particular could, at a stroke of an oil spill, be devastating for the livelihoods of those lakes in terms of food production, and also for the biodiversity, of course. And I've mentioned already the problems of climate change. Next. So in order to recognize the problems, it's not enough just to lay them out as I have done. You have to think about the solutions in a changing and shifting world where those pressures don't, you know, they don't take a break. They continue and they multiply. And indeed, this comes from another initiative on the Alliance for Freshwater Life. You can find it on the website. You can just Google Alliance for Freshwater Life and you'll come across it. And for those of you on Twitter, it's AFL_org, not to be confused with the American Football League. But if you mistype it, you will find all sorts of interesting things about American football. So anyway, the general things which are essential in order to have sustainable use of any ecosystem is the knowledge that supports exploitation and wise use of lakes. That requires data synthesis and using existing information and creating new information. It requires strong policies and policies which are informed and evidence-based, and you need on-the-ground action in terms of the implementation of those policies and using that research and knowledge. And all of that sits as an umbrella. All of that requires an outreach, awareness, and capacity development in order to affect protection and change and wise use. Next slide. And so the solutions require collaboration and also common purpose. So this brings me to the World Water Quality Alliance, where under a UN resolution, it requested UNEP, United Nations Environmental Programme, to work with relevant organizations to address the issues related to water pollution, and particularly to sustainable use of the lakes. And we've heard already the increasing problem of eutrophication, which has been with us for decades and is indeed still with us. So the World Water Quality Alliance is convened as a voluntary and flexible global stakeholder platform, to which actually it's a coalition of the willing in order to try to improve and manage water quality globally. And of course, there was a particular interest in the African Great Lakes, which we'll hear a little bit more in a minute from Andrew. So, and there's a website there, unep.org/WWQA, which gives further information. So next, please. And so the activities so far have included a global assessment of water quality, which is ongoing. And that includes a survey, which I'll come to in a minute. It needs to identify the causal change to highlight the risks to water quality, but also the opportunities for water quality mitigation or to mitigating those problems. And actually thinking about emerging issues, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, it's not only nutrients, of course. And it's based on a philosophy of partnership and co-design in order to actually develop responses and what we might call products to actually deal with this global problem. Next. And so I mentioned the World Survey, International Survey. We are conducting a survey at the moment. There's a shortened version. So if you click on that, maybe someone could just copy it and put it into the text chat. So that's a global survey on factors important for lake restoration and/or protection, because of course it's much cheaper and much more effective to protect a resource than actually to try to restore it. That's the lesson which we as humans find a bit difficult to learn, but that's of course a principle. And I also want to draw your attention to a YouTube video which links to a session we had at the Stockholm World Water Week. And so I'd appreciate as well if maybe that link could be put into the chat, because that was a very nice session which included some of the participants also today, and that is now on a YouTube video for everybody to look at for future. And what we're trying to do at the moment is we're trying to collate enough information to write a white paper on the risks and opportunities for lake water quality protection, improvement and restoration into the future. And that is an ongoing activity at the moment. Okay, next slide. And so at that point, I wanted just to pass over to Andrew, who will give us a few slides on the World Water Quality Alliance Africa use cases. So Andrew, if you're there, I pass over to you.
Thanks, Ken. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Fantastic.
Yes, very good.
Great. So yeah, hi everyone. So Ken introduced the World Water Quality Alliance. So what I hope to introduce here is what's been achieved to date at Lake Victoria, which includes tentative water quality products and services to target water quality issues, as well as the lessons learned with regards to data and its management. And overall, the idea is to use this experience at the other African Great Lakes. So as some background, the African Great Lakes were part of an initiative of looking at 3 African use cases that was piloted by the World Water Quality Alliance. The first was obviously Lake Victoria. The second was the Volta River Basin, and the third was the Cape Town, South Africa groundwater. Overall, what the aim of this whole process was the integration of 3 data types, basically in situ data, satellite imagery, and water quality modeling, really so that this was a format of enhancing the data at the study areas, just because there's a real lack of in situ data that was encountered. So this was combined with a stakeholder engagement process, really using experience in global challenges to support local solutions, providing an evidence base that links water quality hotspots to solutions and investment priorities. So overall, what there was online workshops, as well as online as well as in-person discussions. And the key water quality and challenges at Lake Victoria specifically were identified as eutrophication, algal blooms, hypoxia, siltation, and turbidity, which is, I think, anything new to anybody. What then was discussed were potential water quality products and services to take forward to address these key water quality issues. The ones that were decided through discussions between the riparian fisheries organizations and the World Water Quality Alliance representatives were threefold. The first was coastal eutrophication, the second was water temperature and stratification dynamics, and the third was sediment chemistry. These will be just given a brief overview in the coming slides, if we can jump to the next one. So this slide shows the coastal eutrophication product and service that was being developed. What was done was available data sources were assessed to indicate the potential for coastal eutrophication, really looking at hotspots, seasonal patterns. This was a tool developed to characterize the potential for algal blooms to impact fisheries, or to identify potential links between aquaculture and coastal eutrophication. What you can see there is an example where we used satellite data as well as water quality modeling to complement and validate any in situ measurements of chlorophyll A. The overall outcomes envisioned include the identification of nutrient hotspots, their drivers, their temporal and spatial dynamics, all of which so that priorities can be defined, potential management strategies can be efficiently directed. And that was really a product that really gained a lot of attention from the riparian fisheries institutes, and we hope to continue development. If we can jump to the next slide. So this slide represents the two other products and services under development. The first was water temperature and stratification dynamics, which was used to simulate temperature dynamics in Lake Victoria to inform the extent and stratification and vertical mixing in the water column. The second was sediment chemistry, where we were collaborating with the fisheries institutes on collected sediment and water chemistry. And that was really so that we could understand the release of nutrients, nutrient turnover, as well as indication of any algal blooms. So if we can jump to the next slide. This is the last slide. Basically, this is here as an indication of what the lessons learned. As I mentioned, the Africa use cases overall confirm the general lack of water quality data in Africa. And what's tabulated there is what were identified as items to address and improve water quality data sharing and access. These are applicable not only to Lake Victoria, but the African Great Lakes in general, as well as to Africa as a whole. So first up, there was a general lack of shared databases to store data, especially in transboundary situations that are obviously shared. As a result, there's a need for a common data management system that allows for better collaboration, especially between institutions and across borders. While databases were developed in the past, these were not really specific to, well, these were specific to a project, with maintenance stopping after the project ended. There were a few situations where I accessed databases and the links were dead as soon as the project ended. So there's a need for databases to be owned and run by the actual data providers, many of which are on this call. There's also a need for regional policies for data and information sharing, just because across borders, often there's different data management formats, there's different data formats. So, and also a need for data providers to retain ownership and recognition. There was really a lack of that at times, where sometimes data was provided and then utilized elsewhere without the recognition given to the data providers. There was a need for capacity building, which has been mentioned in the past. There was also a significant north-south divide. This was mentioned in various areas, where data was provided to foreign collaborators with limited benefit at times to country data providers. Thus, there's a need for a data sharing procedure to external collaborators and ongoing development of partnerships. There was a need to improve the impact of research, really through a science policy interface. And then lastly, and most certainly not least, was there is a need for in-country funding, both by local governments, which was a challenge, as well as additional contributions via long-term investments. So the final, I guess, comment was that many of the challenges that were identified in the African use cases were noted to be specific to, well, in addition to the Great Lakes areas, both with regards to water quality and as well as water quality data and management. So the next steps are really to roll out a similar process as was achieved here at the other Great Lakes, really to drive data sharing and better use of alternative data sources. I thanks very much for your time, and I submit.
Thank you, Ken and Andrew. That was a great presentation. I've seen some of that before, and I'm interested to see what questions people might have. We just have a couple minutes for any in-person questions. Farida, you are often eager to ask questions. It's wonderful. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, because I'm struggling with my PhD research. This is why. Thank you, Andrew and Kevin. It's very interesting that something is being done about the water quality. At least there is a lot of research effort about the water quality situation in African Great Lakes. You talked about the use of remote sensed images, that the one that you showed on one of the slides. Which spatial resolution was this? Because I think one of the products that is common, what I came across was the Copernicus land product that gives images for water quality. And in my experience with it, I couldn't make anything out of it because of the gaps. like one day they are producing an image that is a bit full, and then you have cloud cover, and then you have lots of gaps. Maybe the satellites have not picked. So what was your experience on this, please? Or the other one is, have you put this product anywhere that someone can access it, the products of this work that you're currently doing? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. In terms of the satellite data provider, this was done via EOMAP. It's a German-based organization, but they've actually got an app. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop it into the chat. And what it is it provides data at a pretty good resolution. I seem to remember it was at around a 30 meter resolution, and they work with the data. Their products take into account algorithms to remove cloud cover and the likes. They focus specifically on water resources and the likes, really on shallow water surveys, inland water quality. So they focus very much on water quality of water bodies. And so that's their line of work.
Okay.
And that was really needed to be able to fill in the gaps. What we were finding was that spatial data, well, in situ data was sometimes lacking, obviously based on how often you can measure. So modeling is able to then forecast into the future, where satellite imagery was able to give a much better spatial representation, especially things like chlorophyll A, sedimentation, things like that. And so I'll add that into the link itself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Wonderful comment by Joyce. Already making connections, being a mentor. We have more questions coming up, but I think we're going to move forward in hopes that both Ken and Andrew can answer some of those in the chat.